Welcome to this episode of our program Arab Affairs. As usual, we will be discussing an important Arab file. Today we'll be speaking about an important development that just took place. The US has carried out an airstrike targeting Iranian positions in Syria in the first military action undertaken by the new US administration. The Pentagon said the strike destroyed multiple facilities and was ordered in response to attacks against US and coalition personnel in Iraq. It also said that the strike near the Iraqi border in eastern Syria was a proportionate military response that was taken together with diplomatic measures, including consulting with coalition partners. The Pentagon said that the strike was launched at President Joe Biden's direction or direct direction. The message around this strike is probably more important than the strike itself because it gives lots of mixed signals. We'll be speaking about that in our episode today in our first segment, and then we'll move on to Egypt's new batch of aid to Lebanon in trying to ease the crisis that Lebanon has been faced with. Before we start with our discussion, let's have a quick look on the Arab news that took place during this week, and we'll come back for more discussion.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi greeted Saudi Crown Prince Salman bin Abdulaziz on his recovery after undergoing a successful surgery, wishing him speedy recovery and asking God to grant him good health. In a Facebook post on the president's social account, President el-Sisi sent his heartfelt greetings to the Saudi Crown Prince, wishing him health and wellness. Earlier on Wednesday, the Saudi Royal Court said that Prince Mohammed bin Salman had undergone a successful appendix surgery and had left hospital soon after the operation. Foreign Minister Sameh Shoukry asserted on Wednesday Egypt's stance towards the nuclear disarmament issue, calling on nuclear countries to abide by international nuclear non-proliferation treaties. In the recorded statement for the Nuclear Disarmament Conference in Geneva, Shoukry stressed the significance of the international commitment to abide by efforts aimed at establishing a nuclear-free zone in the Middle East. At least 17 pro-Iranian militants were killed in U.S. strikes in Syria at the Iraqi border overnight. Activists said on Friday that the strikes had destroyed 3 lorries carrying ammunition, adding that there had been many casualties belonging to the Popular Mobilization Forces. The Pentagon said that the strikes were retaliation for a rocket attack in Iraq earlier this month that killed 1 civilian contractor and wounded a U.S. service member and other coalition troops. On Monday, a volley of rockets targeted the high-security zone in the Iraqi capital that is home to the American embassy. The attack was the third in a week to target Western diplomatic, military, or commercial installations across Iraq after months of relative calm. UNAID Chief Mark Lowcock urged Gulf states to step up next Monday when the world body seeks to avert a large-scale man-made famine in Yemen by raising $3.85 billion American for humanitarian operations in the war-torn Arabian Peninsula country for 2021. The United Nations describes Yemen as the world's largest humanitarian crisis, with 80% of the people in need. Lowcock warned that if the world body does not receive the money it needs, at a virtual pledging conference on Monday, they are going to see the worst famine in the world had seen for decades. In 2018 and 2019, the United Nations prevented famine in Yemen due to a well-funded aid appeal, but in 2020 the world body only received just over half of the $3.5 billion American it needed. The Arab Parliament convened on Monday, headed by President Adel bin Abdurrahman Al Assoumi. During the session, the Arab Human Rights Monitoring Body was launched. A protocol was also signed between the Arab Parliament and the House of Representatives. In his speech, Al Assoumi said that one of the main tasks of the Arab Parliament is to protect human rights. He also expressed appreciation for Egypt for hosting the Palestinian dialogue to achieve reconciliation among different Palestinian factions.
Welcome back, and to highlight or to read with us this strike and probably the policies of the U.S. towards the Middle East, or what should be expected. We have with us over the phone Dr. Noha Bakr, Professor of Political and Economic Science at the AUC. Dr. Noha Bakr, good evening to you. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with you and also at the Nile TV Mo.
Thank you so much. Dr. Noha, let me take your reading to this strike because it came all of a sudden. Russia said that they just learned about this strike just 5 minutes before it was made. The Syrian regime definitely responded, or that it saw a U.S. move that is not expected, and they expected that the U.S. new administration would be relevant with the norms of policies. I mean, how do you read this strike, this first action of the U.S. towards Syria?
We have different stories regarding this action. The first story is the American story, which is that these locations where the airstrike took place are locations where there is Iranian militias who have been making offensive actions against Americans who are there and against also American alliances. So this is the American story. However, even the American story is divided, where there are Americans who believe that it was not a very constitutional move because simply the Congress was not informed ahead. However, the American administration believes that this was working with the Constitution, Article 2 in the American Constitution, and it is self-defense according to the UN Charter. So this, even within America, there is division regarding this move. On the other side, we can see that this move says that there is no honeymoon between the Americans and the Iranians, as there's a story that is going that there will be American-Iranian negotiations to go back to 5+1 agreement, which was revoked by Trump's administration. I think that the move also was not discussed as expected some time before it with the Russians, only 5 minutes or 10 minutes before, as the Russian story says, which reflects that the Americans are trying to say that they have autonomy over their actions and they are there to inform and not to consult with the Russian side. This is the aspect. On the Syrian side, I think that the Syrians are just out of their civil war, and they cannot dictate or dominate the situation. So that's why their feedback came hazy. On the Iranian side, of course, they condemned the airstrike. I think they are in front of an American administration that is setting its foreign policy through talk and through actions. And this is one of the actions that is shaping the new foreign policy of the Americans.
Exactly. And I'll start from where you ended here, because actually the message of the strike, it's not the strike itself. They said one was killed, several wounded, but others said that there was around 22 fatalities. But this is not exactly what the message was. The message gave lots of signals, and not just to the Syrian or to the Iranian or to Russia, but it also gave several signals towards what should we be expecting from the U.S. policies towards the Middle East. Now, we have seen a kind of revamp or retreat from all the Trump's moves. How do you view the U.S. policies towards the Middle East? What should we be expecting? What are the messages here?
I think that, as I always say in politics, it takes two to tango, and also politics is who has leverage and what cards do you have. So depending on the cards that the Middle East have, it will be part of their vision. However, there are broad lines that dictate the relationship, or the American foreign policy in general, which will affect the relationship. One of them is, of course, the human rights and democracy file. This will be on the agenda. Also, the American interests and the American security. This will come first. Whatever will serve this will be in harmony with the expected coming American foreign policy. However, also, I think that the Americans, because of the competition with China, they will be putting into consideration that a withdrawal from the region will give more space for China to flourish, especially on the economic side. So this will be also into consideration as competition between, although there is, as you said, complete deviation from Trump's policies. However, still China is considered a major competition to the American administration. I think we will see also that the Americans will be moving from the region, as we've seen an attempt during Obama's time, because we can read or we can predict the American foreign policy based on the main principles of the American foreign policy during Obama administration.
If I may ask you here, Dr. Noha, when we're speaking about the region, are we speaking about the Middle East only? Are we dividing the Middle East into regions? I mean here the Gulf area, the North African area, the little to the east, or the area of Syria, Iraq, and the Palestinian territories and
Iraq, but I would exclude, in my definition, Turkey. So we're not clear yet about policies with Turkey. Let's agree that Biden has only talked to 12 leaders in the region. I'm sorry, worldwide, not only in the region. We see more European-American harmony policies. There will be harmony between the European Union policies and the American. We will not see this division as it existed during Trump's time. We will not see this feeling of superiority towards Europe. I think we will also see more of environmental policies and requests that the world cooperate with, or countries cooperate with, environmental policies and green policies. This will affect also the American decisions. We will see conditionality in many things from the American side. I think that it is an administration that has started very early in taking foreign. There was an understanding or a prediction that due to the polarization in the United States and due to the pandemic, that there will be more focus on the internal side. However, it's clear that they are working on the internal and the external side. I think that the institutions will be active. With Trump, it was a one-man show. I think here we will see that the National Security Council and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will be having a say in the policy.
Yes, very much indeed. Let me here take from what you said, and yes, indeed, there was a reverse to policies of Trump. I mean here, the Biden administration approach towards the NATO, for an instant, towards the European Union, for an instant, definitely the Paris Agreement. But when we are speaking about here, the Middle East in particular, because our concerns here are what would be the U.S. policy towards the Middle East? What would be the U.S. policies towards interfering in the domestic affairs of the Arab region? And what should we be expecting? Now, this is from one side. From the other side, also, the U.S. has showed its will to go ahead or to sit again with Iran to discuss a return to the nuclear pact. However, came this strike. I mean, here, what kind of policies are we supposed to be witnessing here in the Middle East?
I think it's very clear to all of us that, again, the fact that the foreign policy, one of the main pillars will be the respect for harmony between the U.S. and any country will be the files of democracy and human rights. This does not mean that they will not interact. This does not mean that they will neglect or they will sacrifice American interests or whatever is for the benefit of the American side for these two files. However, they will keep hammering regarding these two files, and they will keep putting conditions on issues like cooperation on different fields. And also from the Middle Eastern country side, it's the role of the country to explain what are the challenges, to request support, technical support on several files, and to cooperate.
We are here speaking about the Middle East, but the Middle East, as I said, is divided into regions. So the Gulf has its own issues with Iran as a big influencer to the incidents or the developments in the Gulf area. We have the North African Arab countries who are also influenced with some of the interference of, as you said, respectively here, a country like Turkey, for an instance. We have also the Palestinian cause, which is the core of the problem or the start of all problems. And here is the situation divides from one position to another. What should we be expecting from the U.S. towards the Gulf area? What should we be expecting from the U.S. towards the African Arab countries, or let me say it, Africa at large? What we should be expecting from the U.S. towards countries or interferences of countries in different ways?
I think that there will be a dialogue, and based on this dialogue and based on the outcome of it, the policies will be shaped. For instance, if we talk about North African countries, we're talking about countries that are supporting and cooperating in fighting terrorists. We're talking about countries that are supporting the security of the north of the Mediterranean, which is very vital to Europe. And Europe and the U.S. coming closer, and NATO being more functioning now in harmony and with respect, I think this should lead to the need to this region, and also developing the region in order to be able to support the goals. This is, for instance, one of the files that will be important: the continuation in fighting terrorism and in fighting crime. I think that it's expected that there will be also some work on multilateral level. So it will be U.S., Europe, and whatever in the region as a whole, or as you've divided them to sections: the Gulf on one side and North African countries on one side. What about Iran? What about? I think there will be movements on the Israeli file. This is not to say that Israeli-Palestinian file. This is not to say that there will be retreat on decisions taken during Trump's rule, such as moving the embassy to Jerusalem or whatever. No, we should not expect any retreat on these moves, but we should expect that there will be a start of how to reach a solution to this issue. And I think here the role of Egypt is important, because we work with the Palestinian factions in order to have tolerance and sit on one table and try to reach a peace agreement. This is a file that was completely neglected during Trump's time. Another file is the Libyan file. I think that the role that Egypt is playing in the stability of Libya and in empowering and in trying to support in building the institutions of Libya, the security institution, the judicial institution, all this will be also... So these are all leverages for some countries while others do not. It depends. It will not be like taking the whole group of countries, but bilateral and multilateral issues will be, or multilateral moves will be taken.
Here, let me take from what you said, Dr. Noha, one issue that you pinpointed your finger on, which is Egypt. And Egypt with the United States has been in strategic relations since decades, regardless of the different administrations that came. Usually the relations between the US and Egypt is so strategic and looked from different perspective. How far does the US new administration realize the role Egypt can play in different files in the region and the pivotal role of Egypt in this upcoming stage?
I think that they realize, and they have the consultants that will explain to them. We've been seeing articles talking about the pivotal role of Egypt, and please do not look at the narrow side of the political and security element of cooperation on fighting terrorism or different files, how it will be handled. We have to look also at the economic aspect, because the figure of American investments in Egypt, how Egypt is very important to penetrate to Africa, especially with the free trade agreements. All these are important files for the American side, especially that they need to empower the American investments, and also you are talking about a market not only of 100 million Egyptians, but also a market that will allow you the route to Africa, and also can help in not making China prevail totally in Africa. I'm sure that there is a full understanding, and we've seen that the first round of discussions have started between the State Department in the US and between our Minister of Foreign Affairs. I think there will be a continuation of discussions. We have also the security relation between the Pentagon and our military has been always even in the difficult times, they have always eased the tension. So I think that there will be a continuation of cooperation on different levels, on security level. This all will help in shaping the coming relationship.
Especially that we have seen here a visit of a high-ranking U.S. Pentagon official, or the commander of the CENTCOM, just a few days ago. If I may here finally ask you of U.S. existence in Africa and how you see that.
The AFRICOM have been existing in Africa. There are different or more than one, how do you say it, military existence on the ground in Africa. But on the economic side, there is very strong competition with China. On the cultural side, there is, because China has been existing in Africa very strongly, have been supplying Africa with there are lots of investments and projects. So I think that maybe because this administration is willing more to work on multilateral level, they will go to the African Union, but they will continue to play the security role to defend American interests in Africa and to try to curtail the Chinese existence in Africa.
Right, Dr. Noha Bakr, Professor of Political Science at the AUC, we thank you so much for reading the scene here with us and for your input. And moving on to our next segment, and President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has directed to offer support and solidarity to Lebanese people in different crises and tribulations. This is not the first batch. This is one of the batches that Egypt have been sending in trying to ease the suffering of the Lebanese people. Let's watch.
President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi directed on Thursday to offer support and solidarity to the Lebanese people in different crises and tribulations. In this regard, the Armed Forces General Command ordered a military aid plane to take off from East Cairo Air Base heading to Lebanon, carrying huge amounts of medical aid presented from the armed forces to the Lebanese armed forces. The Lebanese Minister of Defense expressed gratitude and deep thanking to Egypt's leadership and armed forces for offering help and support to help country during crisis times. The minister hailed the deep strategic ties that bind the two countries, and Egypt's aid to Lebanon reflected one of the bright aspects of joint cooperation to continue boosting Egypt's relations with brotherly nations. On the ground, the caretaker energy minister said that Lebanon's energy ministry could not pay for fuel to generate electricity beyond March unless more financing is approved. Lebanon, which is grappling with a deep financial crisis triggered by a mountain of debt, already lacks power generation capacity, so homes and businesses face power cuts for several hours each day, forcing many to turn to private generators.
Right, welcome back, and moving on to Lebanon, where we are seeing another or a new batch of aid going to the Lebanese brothers in response to their crisis there. And to highlight the issue, we have with us over the phone Engineer Hassan Shaban, political analyst. Good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon.
And the Lebanese situation now, a new government is or has just been put. Egypt is continuing on with its support to the Lebanese people. How do you see the Egyptian movements towards the Lebanese crisis? How do you see the Egyptian role in trying to support the Lebanese people?
See, Egypt and Lebanon have very strong relations ever since. You mean like since the independence of Lebanon till today, with the forming of the Arab League and everything. But a lot of water went under the bridge ever since. Things in Lebanon are not as it used to be in the mid-20th century. A lot of new forces on the ground, especially the Hezbollah being there in Lebanon, changed the political equation in Lebanon. So Egypt is showing support to the Lebanese people, regardless of their, to which party they belong. We are supporting the Lebanese people as it used to be. But there is a lot of changes that are taking place on the ground right now since the American administration assumed office. You see, the whole conflict in Lebanon actually is related to the political and the military presence of Hezbollah. And this is creating a lot of instability in Lebanon. Regardless of our medical support that our armed forces sent to the Lebanese army, still there is a lot of complications, a lot of problems are facing Lebanon. So we have to watch carefully what happened 48 hours ago when the U.S. Air Force, attacked some troops that belong to, or actually they are supported by the Iranians in the north of Syria.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Go ahead, please.
Yes, this is exactly what I was going to ask you, sir. How would such an attack or strike on the Iranian position or the backed Iranian militias How would that reflect on the Lebanese scene and add to its crisis?
Okay. What's happening right now, we have to consider also, like 2 weeks ago, the new American administration withdrew their support to the allies, the Gulf allies in Yemen. This is an act of good intention toward Iran. We are no longer supporting the war in Yemen, and we're calling for peace. And we would like to see the Iranians show some also good intentions elsewhere, because, you know, the Iranian influence in the area is no longer acceptable by the U.S., neither by the Arab countries. So I think we actually showed good intentions in Yemen, but again, we will not allow the Iranians to expand in the north of Syria, leading, I mean, this influence in Syria is very much connected with the Hezbollah. And Hezbollah is categorized as a terrorist group, actually, in the U.S.
Just you here mentioned a very important component of the Lebanese system.
Political makeup, yes.
Yes, because we are speaking here about a group that is part of any government that should be formed in Lebanon. So are we speaking here about Hezbollah as a political group that should be joining ranks with the new Lebanese government? Are we speaking about the militias that have their hands outside even Lebanon? This is why I'm asking, how would this issue of striking Syria reflect on Lebanon from this very particular point of view?
This is what happened in the north of Syria is a message to Iran. If you want to resume negotiations on the nuclear issue and the enriching of the uranium in Iran, with the support of the 5 nations that actually still support the agreement that President Donald Trump canceled or freezed, you're going to have reason. You're going to have to listen to what we say. Withdraw all your troops from Yemen and stop supporting the Houthis. We will form a new democratic government in Yemen. Also, stop interfering and mingling in the Syrian issue, and you're considering Syria is a path to Lebanon to support Hezbollah. You have to consider also this very silent neighbor, Israel. Israel considers Iran the enemy number 1, okay? And Hezbollah is just a knife stuck in the back of Israel, and Israel is watching all the movements in the area that the Iranians are making, and I think in the very near future, definitely there will be some sort of confrontation between Hezbollah, who's been preparing for a war with Israel for some time. I think the international community is now forming a very negative opinion about the Hezbollah, and if the U.S. and Israel will have a confrontation with Hezbollah, I think this will be welcomed by the international community. Israel will not really stop watching Hezbollah and will not stop watching Iran. I think very soon we will see Hezbollah act as a political party, probably, but not a militia. They have to give up their weapons and their arsenal if they want to still survive on the political arena in Lebanon. Actually, what seems to be a very calm situation in the Middle East is just the beginning of a new era. And I think very soon we will see a lot of changes on the map. Hopefully, Egypt will play a major role in the future because, we faced with great courage the terrorist attacks that took place in Egypt for about 15 years. So I think I'm optimistic. I think in spite of the fact that President Biden actually was, calling for peace, but sometimes you have to use war to achieve peace.